Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. A quick note before we start, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions. John Donlon of Gold Coast Mortgage, thanks so much for joining us on Modern Financial Wellness. I appreciate you being here.
Hey, Jim, it's great to be here. Thanks for hosting, and I'm glad to participate.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about buying a home, first-time home buyers, and what all goes into that. Hopefully, we can leave people with some ways to be best prepared for that experience. Before we dig in, though, why don't you tell people who you are and what you do, a little bit about your business?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We're an independent mortgage broker, and we opened up in the late 90s. I had some experience in the mortgage industry through prior work that I did, and also in a former life, I owned real estate and rental properties. So I bought a home. I also bought properties for the purpose of renting out. So I had a lot of experience with the mortgage process, and then went fully in on opening a mortgage brokerage, and we opened in the late 90s, and been working with homeowners for over 2 decades, and having a lot of fun with it, and
that's awesome.
Learning a lot in the process.
Do you have an idea? You're a pretty analytical guy, so I wouldn't be surprised if you had the actual number, but generally speaking, do you have an idea of how many loans you've written over that 20-year period?
Yeah, it's so there's been literally thousands, right?
Right.
And in that, there's been even more discussion. So we'll talk to people about a property that they don't buy. So we'll have discussions on that. And there's a lot of failure. The homes fail. The applicant loses their purpose in the transaction. They bail out and they retreat back to the basement of their parents' house where they were living. And so even more than the loans that we have facilitated and the homeowners that we've helped, there's been a lot where in order to get over the finish line, we've already taken 3 at-bats. And each of those at-bats has a huge amount of intellectual property that we've accumulated. So
yeah,
let's say we've worked with 10,000 homeowners. There's probably been another 20 or 30,000 conversations before that. And the failures are even more important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, what you touched on a little bit, the failures and the why or the purpose falls off. That's what I'm most interested in maybe talking with you about today. When I think about, I've bought 2 homes, sold one. So we bought our first home and then moved into our second home, a few refinances. And a lot of those transactions were some of the most emotional, most anxiety-inducing experiences of my life, right? And so I think if it weren't for our purpose, I don't know that we would have ended up getting something done. So that's hopefully we can kind of unpack some of that today and explore. I guess maybe I should start off with a question in that 10,000 to 30,000 conversations. Why is buying a home so stressful? Do you have that boiled down in your mind?
Well, there's a lot at stake, right? There's potential homelessness, right, to some degree. And there's whether you're buying it for yourself and 2 cats, or you're buying it for you and your wife, or maybe there's a family involved. There's a lot of people dependent upon the person that's driving the transaction. So if you're the spouse that has to shorten up a work commute, you're leading the charge in trying to get a home closer to work. And you're bringing people along with you in a lot of cases. So there may be kids involved, right? And there's going to be new school districts, and there's just an exorbitant amount of unknowns, things that you don't
Mm,
have an answer to. And some people need an answer to everything. And some people are okay saying, okay, we'll figure this out when we get there.
mm,
I've used the analogy of like thumbing through a book, and you're on a page that's related to real estate and your future house, which you haven't met yet, right? You don't know what it looks like. You don't know where it is, but you know you've got to move. You can't visualize it. You can't make it real. So you have to have this level of trust in the process where you swing on the vine and you go across a swiftly moving river, and you're going to
mm.
come down safely on the other side. But there's a lot of stress in not knowing that. Are you going to fall in the water? Are you going to make it to the other side? Is the vine going to
Right.
collapse? Are there people
Yeah.
waiting for you on the other side that'll receive you? Or right? So
I bet
stakes are
you,
high.
yeah,
I get
there's stakes are high and there's a million different iterations of that. I know in my own experience, my wife and I were moving from Boston to a different part of the world. We moved up to Portsmouth, New Hampshire,
well, right.
for a lot of different reasons. Um, and we felt good about where we were going because we kind of fell in love with the community first and decided proactively to move up here. But when I think back in my own experience, it was all these other things, and you touched on a few of them. One, I
Well,
was responsible because I'm the financial advisor to make sure that it makes financial sense. So there's a huge burden there. And we live in a what tends to be a, relatively speaking, maybe a little bit more expensive area. So we weren't going to be saving and investing maybe as much as we could have if we had
well,
moved to a different area. The other thing that I dealt with, I grew up in Connecticut, and my folks are still there. My sister's still there. We fortunate to have a very close family, and it was kind of cementing the reality that I wasn't going to be moving back to Connecticut.
right.
So I felt, even
Yeah,
though my folks were supportive, I didn't necessarily feel like I could talk through my emotions of this move and trying to find a place in Portsmouth because I didn't want to make them
yeah,
feel bad. So
right.
as I thought about, preparation for this conversation, it wasn't necessarily the move itself. It's all these other things that kind of go into that transaction.
Yeah,
And then not to mention you're about to make the biggest financial commitment of your life,
right.
potentially.
Yeah.
It's all this other stuff.
So everything competes with the mission, right? You have to have a job, which requires time, and that's how you're going to pay for all of this. And the home ownership it has an appetite of itself. There's going to be financial commitments to pay for it. You're going to do work on it. You're going to keep it clean and take out the trash and do all the things that are necessary. And that all competes with some other aspect of your life. So the home buying process, it has to be 100 hours. I'm going to guess it's more. It could be, you could be into it for several hundred hours. And folks that think they can do it in 40 hours, or do it while they're still working, not take like time off to take a vacation week.
Mm,
It's going to start to come to a boil. Like things will compete enough that something's going to
yeah.
lose.
You mentioned that competition. I'm actually working with a client right now who, because of a job and a relationship, should move, and they should find a new place to live. And I think what they're struggling with now is the space to commit to the process. It's just, the hours that it's going to take the weekends off, take the days off from the business to go and find this new location in this new place is a little
Yeah,
overwhelming.
yeah,
And it competes. I like that word that you just referenced. It's this competition of all these different aspects of our life that need to be kind of reprioritized. Something's got to give, right? I guess.
yeah. It's emotionally charged. It's nothing short of a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. And no matter what happens, there will be failure along the way. There's going to be points in time where you're disappointed. You've got to step up to the batting plate and take a swing, and somebody is going to come along and pay $50,000 more for your dream house, or you
It's,
gotta go.
it's yeah. I'm laughing. I'm sorry to jump in, but I'm
Yeah, yeah,
reliving this now, and it's been a while since I've unpacked some of this stuff. But the first offer that we made up here, I literally had a full blown panic attack. I went back to my in laws and needed a minute to like walk around the block. And we failed at that bid, and it turned out to be a great failure because
right.
the home we ended up in was the place we really wanted in hindsight. So all
So,
failure isn't bad, but I can remember just that roller coaster of, man, thinking about the commitment you're about to make, and then not being successful. It's intense the entire time.
and failure is necessary in the journey. So, when you'll need the ability to walk away from any negotiation at a certain point of time. If you don't, you may wind up owning a house that isn't perfect for you. So, will be part of a failure, and I'll support that failure. Just it wasn't meant to be. If
Mm.
there was a smell of oil in the basement, if there was something that just isn't quite right, you walk away. It's not knowing everything you need to know. It's a point to like pack it up
How
and
do
go
you
to the next one.
do you have any thoughts on how to recognize that intuition? So the example that I gave of the house that I was panicked over, it just didn't feel right to me. It was a bungalow home, so the second floor was kind of dormered on both sides. My wife and I are both tall. I felt kind of
Yeah,
closed in on the second
right.
floor, and I think we talked ourselves into making an offer on that home. Um, because of the emotions of needing to move, needing to not needing to, but wanting to leave Boston and finally feel settled. So we went ahead and pushed through all those warning signs. Do you have any thoughts on being in a position to kind of recognize those feelings that you're having, or
What?
those red
Yeah.
flags that people should maybe be aware of to not ignore?
So, you got to be true to yourself, right? And so I encourage people to write like a mission statement of what they want out of the transaction, to design it. I put like a mock mission statement up on my website where I describe like the future house that I wanted with my wife and ones that we didn't want. And um, at some point in time, you will be exposed to something that's outside of your mission. It's inevitable. Something's going to come along and somebody's going to say, hey, I've got a beautiful lot. Why don't you build? Like, oh, I don't know anything about building. And that's outside of your mission, and you're not a builder. And so you have to shut down all those kind of random things that you're going to see, and just stay true to what you're trying to accomplish. And yes, you have to be very true to yourself. Walk away from, a life sentence of banging your forehead on a low beam in a bungalow, right? And because that's what you're setting up for if you're not true to yourself. So make your parameters and stay with them. And if you're going to go outside of those parameters, get buy-in on the whole team, whether it be your wife or in-laws or an attorney or a realtor or anybody. Say, okay, we're going into a different lane now, deliberately, and get everybody's buy-in on switching gears. Like you're looking at a single family, but a multifamily comes up in the right neighborhood. Are you prepared to be a landlord, or are you just going to become a landlord because of an
I
external
think
influence?
that's I think that's great advice, and we'll link to that in show notes and whatnot if you have an example on the website. And I'm listening to you describe this mission statement, but it sounds like you're telling people to really spend some time with their purpose, what's important to them, what their values are, kind of up front, and actually describe those things in a written form, which is really similar to what we kick off a financial planning process. That has to be done. What's important to you has to be really agreed upon and memorialized up front, or you kind of lose yourself. You lose tact in the process. At some point, you
Yeah.
can get blown off course.
And when things get really, really difficult, as they have to, you can lean back on that mission for support, right? And it'll kind of drive the journey. It's the fuel, and without it, you can lose speed and you could give up, right? So that mission will describe what it looks like at the end. Is it a glass of red wine in front of a fireplace, right, with a dog at your feet? Is it a 10-minute commute? Is it a kitchen that allows you to host your college roommates for a night or a weekend and cook for them, right, and show off your inner cooking skills? Like there's a why behind it, and if you don't bring that out and honor it and protect it, because there's going to be 10 different people that would try to strip that away from you, that want you to do something else. Oh, you can build a kitchen later, or you can install a gas fireplace, like once you own the house. Or if you want a garage for your motorcycle and they're trying to sell you a house without a garage, they'll be like, oh, you can just build a garage later. But staying true to that mission, it's imperative, and
it's just a reminder where we started. It is going to get difficult. It is going to get challenging. It is going to get emotionally overwhelming at times for most people. Most people are, driven and have a handle on things, and they're good regardless of the stress. But,
2023 is it's so different than 2013 or 2003. And the stakes are higher. The competitive aspect of buying and acquiring and living in real estate is really significantly more difficult than when I bought my first home. I wouldn't want to have to rebuy the home I'm living in. I'm not sure I could win it. Like it's the inventory is scarcer. There's more people desiring Portsmouth and Boston, and so you look over your shoulder and you've got people who have more means than you do to pursue this. They may have more emotion, and they may have more urgency than you do, and so they can compete and win. So I guess the big thing is going into home buying. You can do it reactively, that you can see something and go try and buy it, or you can be proactive, back the clock up 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and start to build that mission and then walk towards it. In those cases where we have the luxury of time, it's not that there's a fire alarm ringing and they've got 30 days to get out of their apartment because their landlord's condoing their apartment and they got to be out in a month. This is something where they have reason to believe that their landlord is going to condo their apartment next year. And they begin looking now, and we go through the steps. So we do the mission statement, and we give it purpose. And then 95% of the obstacles that can come up during the process, we can address those before the starter pistol gets fired. So we can mock up almost the whole thing with insert your mission statement house, right? 95% of it we can address ahead of time. We can role play. We can say, what if this happens? When are we going to use an escalation clause? What if there's a bump out clause? All these things can be addressed so that when we go live, you're not calling me crying because we've got 2 hours to respond to a bump out clause.
Yeah,
right?
so describe, I was going to ask, what are some of those what ifs? Can you shed a little bit more light on a bump out clause? What's some of those things that people should be aware of, needing to consider? What comes up?
Yeah. So there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of things that will come up, right? And but we know in almost every case, there's going to be a competitive aspect to buying the home, that there's other people right over your shoulder, and they are really hungry to be in this home, maybe even more so than you are. So you have to present in the best possible light. It's how you arrive, what you're showing to accompany the offer, and who your team is, and knowing that the offer that's selected is going to represent the lowest risk to the homeowner selling the home. right? That's the goal. They don't want to necessarily help you fantasize something that may never happen for you. Like you say, okay, I really would love to buy this home, but I can't afford it, or I don't have the
Mhm.
down payment for it, or I don't have the means to maintain it. But you go through the exercise. So they're trying to weed those people out. And who's left as a contender to buy the home should present very confidently and very strong. And we can strip away almost all of the things that would make a buyer appear weak, and so that they come into it that uh,
Mm.
they're healthy, they're refreshed, they're ready to buy, and not looking like they're kicking a tire or that they're not sincere.
And so is that, part of your service and what the expectation should be of a buyer, that they're getting some guidance in what's realistic? And, am I truly prepared to be making an offer on this type of property in this type of location? Do you see folks come to you and after a conversation you're saying, "Look, I'd love to help you, but I think your expectations are a little high and maybe we need to go back to that mission and that purpose and revisit what you're looking for."
Yeah, there's buying takes practice, so you won't know your dream house if it's the first one you see. You won't know it's perfect for you. So I encourage folks to get in a fair amount of basements and start to gauge like what will work for them, and that helps me and them so that when they finally get to the perfect match, they're willing to run through a brick wall to make it happen. Right. So this is it. This is what we've been looking for. We've been at bat 19 times, right? And we've swung and missed, and this is the one. So are we going to take another swing, or are you going to make sure that you wind up being the owner? And there's a very strategic process to, out of all the offers on the table, making sure that your offer is the one that goes to the top of the pile, that gets the most interest. And there's various ways to do that. And they take risk too, right? We know in this marketplace that some offers to be considered serious are asked to waive their home inspection contingency,
Mm.
which would be a suicidal activity. For as long as I've been in real estate, people would say never ever waive your home inspection contingency. But it's a paradox because your winning offer will not be accepted with a home inspection contingency. And that's what
Mhm.
we've seen for the past 30 months. So how do we minimize that risk? And part of the process would be hiring a home inspector. I call it a home inspector in tow, in that you take that home inspector, you rent their brain basically at $500 an hour, and you take them to the home that you're going to see, and they'll give you an opinion if this home has any fatal flaws, which could
Mm.
include asbestos or black mold or a
So
foundation
you're
that's kicked out.
taking this person like through an open house or
Yeah,
through a viewing of the home prior to making an offer and saying,
right.
"Hey, I need your expertise to point out anything that, really concerns you, highlight any, fatal flaws of the property that could cost us down the line." And
Yeah,
you're doing
and
that up front.
you've had a cup of coffee with this home inspector so that they know. Say, I'm not concerned with the age of the dishwasher. Okay, if I have to buy a new dishwasher, that's okay. Uh, but I really am concerned with powdery post beetle infestation, which could cause a sagging roof line, and my repair bill is over $100,000 for that. Or a chimney which has a crack in the basement and it goes through 2 floors of the house. So the home inspector knows, okay, we're looking for $25,000 problems only or above, or cumulatively of 25 or 100.
Hmm.
They can handle, a ungrounded electrical outlet, right, or non-GFI service. We got to replace those, but we're talking hundreds, not tens of thousands. Uh,
Hmm.
so one home inspector I had met with had done a inspection after the purchase, post-purchase inspection. So the couple bought the house with no inspection. They hired him to make a list of what needed to be done. And he had it right for the basement. Second step down, he could see already six figures in repairs just by not even on the steps. It's the age of the electrical panel, moisture content, type of foundation, and looking around, catching the furnace still wrapped in asbestos, and you're like, okay, this is it's $150,000 room right now we're
So
talking
you're
about.
not, you're preparing to waive a formal inspection as part of the purchase and sale, but you're getting an inspector to give you their opinion up front of what you think you're up against, so you can make an informed decision on as to whether or not you want to go ahead and waive that inspection when you make your offer.
Because it usually plays out that we're considering your offer, but it has a home inspection contingency, which is a potential point of failure for the seller. Could fail because of that, or you could renegotiate price. So what they'll do is they'll say, we'll consider your offer, but you have to remove the financing contingency, or the home inspection contingency. And sometimes they'll say financing contingency as well. That has to come out. And so knowing that conversation is likely to happen, you've already had the inspector through the house. He's eliminated like the big boy concerns, right? The real big hazards. And if that comes to it, and this is the house of your dreams, you can say, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to waive off on that. Otherwise, you could be looking at offering on 50 houses before you'll get your offer accepted. So it's almost like standard operating procedure to be expected to waive your home inspection contingency. And
as a side note, are you seeing any of that start to slow down with rates? I
mean,
we can have a more technical conversation another time, but you are starting to see that a little bit with
a little bit. So, but there's still not a lot of inventory. If you look around Portsmouth or Boston or Topsfield, there's very little inventory on the market. So they're preserving, they're trying to minimize the risk to the seller by asking people to waive the contingencies. And so, it's still quite a bit, almost on 3/4 of the deals. The deals that are allowing it aren't, maybe they're not as fast moving or desirable properties.
So starting with the mission statement, just to kind of go back and summarize where we're at right now, it sounds like a recommendation of yours would be to really spend some time with that mission. What are we trying to accomplish? What's going to make us happy in a home? Giving yourself enough time. I don't know if that's a formal or connected to the mission statement, but just giving yourself enough of a timeline. This is going to be a pretty involved process. And then this idea of utilizing the services of a professional inspector up front, so you're better prepared, as another idea to kind of get yourself prepared and ready to make a good offer on a home. What else can people do ahead of time? What should they be thinking about and preparing themselves for when they enter into a purchase?
Yeah. So the earlier you can start the process, the better. And I'm very okay with talking to people a year out. So that's the more time we have, the better the transaction is going to go. Starting to get involved right at the point of needing a home is the worst thing you can do. So you start it before you need it, when you want it, right? We say, okay, my time as a child living with my parents is going to be over. I'm going to try to close that chapter. Living in an apartment where you can smell cooking and hear footsteps and toilet flushes of other units from your unit, that's over, right? It's okay. The goal is in 2 years I want to have my own privacy. And so knowing that, okay, you've got a little bit of a why there, and you can begin to put together a plan. So I think the most crucial thing is that you have the ability to be proactive on the journey as opposed to reactive, where somebody fired a starter pistol and you've got 30 or 60 or 90 days to find the home of your dreams. It's just not going to happen. You can't sync destiny with a clock, right? It just needs to unfold at its period of time.
I think back, we started looking in the spring, the typical spring buying season. I think we had looked and secured a real estate agent even earlier, kind of end of winter, February, early March. And we were at it until the very end of that year. It took almost
Mhm.
the entirety of the year from start to finish, um,
Yeah,
to get something done when we bought our first place.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I think the team that is going to surround and protect you is important as well. So uh, the person who's handling your finances is usually like the person heading up the team, right? And so they're talking about where's the down payment coming from? Is this going to be heavy lifting? Is it even within the budget, right? So the financial person, I would say, is probably where the discussion begins. And does the home play a role in their future financial picture?
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I have some clients that their why is that they don't want to pay a landlord rent or they don't want to pay the landlord's mortgage. And so I'll time out there and say, uh, you may not be paying your landlord's mortgage payment, but you're going to be paying a big bank more mortgage interest than what you're paying in rent. So that may not be like the right reason to go
Right.
for ownership. And so I'm okay like pressure testing the why early on in the process. And sometimes the why is it's not grounded.
Right.
It's kind of loose, and so we got to
Yeah.
go back and tighten that up.
We've had this conversation before offline, and I think it's worth mentioning. Some people are perfectly fine renting forever, and that
Totally,
fits their
forever.
lifestyle. And you mentioned, the amount of mortgage interest and paying a big financial institution, and that says nothing about just the other costs of ownership. So the landlord replaces the light bulbs, he fixes the dishwasher when it breaks, he, typically covers snow removal or the other things associated with where you might live. Those all fall to the homeowner. So just
Yeah,
simply not paying rent and trading rent for a mortgage payment isn't maybe the full analysis that people need to consider. So I'm glad
yeah.
we touched on that.
So right, and so tenancy uh, could be a dream lifestyle. It really could. It offers you freedom on the weekends that you're not cutting grass and scraping paint and doing these things. You're kayaking and walking your dog and doing things that you enjoy doing. So home ownership definitely competes with other aspects of your life, whereas renting, you're simply paying it, but there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about. You don't ever have to worry about being upside down on your value, meaning that you owe more than the house is worth.
Hmm.
You'll never have to read an article related to a short sale or a foreclosure because it just doesn't apply to you. Terms like loan costs and escrow and
Hmm.
mortgage interest, those are terms that just simply don't have a place in your life. And that's okay if your job is likely to move you around every few years. Then having a big backpack on that's called home ownership um, probably isn't for you. So
So
there's, mhm.
yeah, I was just going to summarize. So just not renting anymore isn't maybe a good central focus on in the mission statement.
Yeah, or I'm not getting along with my parents, right? They're not going to buy a house, right? so
They might have a different opinion. That might be enough
yeah,
to
yeah,
build into the
you're right.
mission statement. Yeah.
Yeah, or you're just like just something that's a little bit more petty. So the decision to own has to be thought out very carefully because there's more than 20 reasons why renting is the perfect place for people to be. Like there's a lot of reasons why renting is much better than home ownership. And if you're in that category, continuing to rent is utopia.
Mm,
You're not held, you're not anchored down. You have the ability to move around.
right.
Um, so yeah, just I don't think the financial consideration should drive it. I think it's more a quality of life issue, and what you're going to do in your residence on your spare time. Do you like to host? Do you have a creative side where you paint or work on cars or play musical instruments? Like, those are things that are really hard to do in an apartment community, right? If your landlord comes home and your car's up on jacks and the tires, the engine's out of it, he's not going to appreciate that. Or if you're doing a jam session on your balcony, right, in an apartment with your buddies from college, doesn't fly. But you can do those things in a house, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So as long as you have a good why, right? You've thought about that, and then you've connected with a financial person or done the math yourself and feel good about, the financial situation that you will be in. Who else is a part of that team that you're building? What are the next folks that you need to reach out to kind of connect with and set yourself up?
So as soon as you enlist a commissioned salesperson on your project, the projects may go quicker than you had hoped or wanted. So if you pull in a transactional real estate agent that wants you to buy something, he wants to sell you something, and he wants to do it before June 30th, he's going to be encouraging you to put offers in on houses really swiftly. So before you align with somebody who's going to earn a commission on your project, make sure they're the right person. And I don't necessarily think you have to pull them in too early. And so whether to use a real estate agent or not, I recommend you employ a buyer's agent whenever possible. I think they bring a ton of good value, and you don't necessarily have to pay for that service yourself. But if you bring them in too early, you may be looking at houses and making offers before you're mentally ready. And the financing side of it is extremely mechanical. So we go through a pre-approval process, like any other mortgage company. And that comes down to mathematics and credit. And I look at the mortgage as a three-leg stool. We've got assets and down payment. There's income and job, and then there's a credit leg. And we just want to make sure that all those legs are supportive and in good health. And if we start that process earlier than later, we have time to address issues that could come up on that side. So
as far as credit, this might be slightly off topic, but it came up recently with a client who had something they just weren't aware of hitting their credit report. There's no reason to check it. And, when they did finally get around to it, there it was, and the score wasn't quite what they wanted it to be. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts where people need to be credit-wise to really be in a position to buy a home from a score? Any other thoughts on kind of the credit aspect of it?
Mm-hmm. So I think the word is knowledgeable. You want to be knowledgeable on your own credit. So if you're seeing your credit for the first time when you're making an offer on a house, it's way too late. There's no time to do anything correctively or anything proactive to the credit report. So back the clock up 6 to 12 months, okay? And then let's take a look at a baseline credit, okay? Is it flawless, or are there issues that we need to address? And so given time, we can address a lot of issues on the credit report. And so time is a luxury.
And how do you typically handle that? So 6 or 12 months, when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting this journey," at that point, are you helping them take a look at that and become more knowledgeable as part of that kind of qualification process?
With their permission, we'll pull baseline credit and we'll start to wireframe the transaction. So we'll build the structure around it, what it looks like hypothetically. There's no address in the scenario yet, but we're looking at price ranges. We're looking at tax rates for certain towns. We're looking at Massachusetts versus New Hampshire tax rates, where we're looking at all the 400 attributes that go into the approval. And some are static, they can't be changed. So if you've been working for the same company for 10 years and you're on a 3% annual pay raise, your income is pretty static. There's not much we can do about that. But the other side of the ratio, the debt to income ratio, is a lease payment for your vehicle. And if that's coming due, should we think about paying that lease off early, buying the vehicle off the lease, and then doing a loan off of the 401k to evaporate the payment so that your income takes you further, just as an example. So one part of the ratio may be static, but the other side of it could be fluid, right? And so the example I just said, if somebody has a $400 a month car lease, it sounds like it's static, but there probably is a way to make adjustments to that. So if we have time, sure, we can do a lot of things. We've had many people buy the lease out early, get a loan for the remainder of it, and then do something with the loan related to paying it off. So you can't make a lease payment go away, but you can end a lease early and convert it into a purchase, and that results in.
I was just going to jump in, but I think you clarified it. Again, it comes down to having enough time. So starting that process and being aware of what the implications of your financial profile are early enough so that you can proactively affect what it looks like when you do make an offer on a home. But again, if you're waiting till you're going to make an offer on your dream home, you can run up into some of these things on your credit report or your debt to income ratio that just, it is what it is at that point. You're not qualified.
It's just too late. And a 3-point differential in your credit score can have, no exaggeration, it can have a $50,000 impact on your expense. It's 3 points, right? How? Why? That makes no sense, right? But the interest rate structure is all risk-based priced. So for every 10-point tier of FICO scores, it introduces a new low-level price adjustment for that applicant. And so just, tripping between let's say a 741 and a 738 FICO score may be meaningless to you as a consumer, but on the mortgage side, it could trip a eighth or 1/4%, let's say, in the interest rate over the life of the loan. And if you extrapolate that difference, that the mortgage interest can be outstanding. So it's criminal when we don't have the chance to address that ahead of time. But if we have the luxury.
Right. And in that specific example, I think you said 731 to 728. But the client that I'm working with, it was probably everything else, all things considered, a 750 borrower in the high 600s because of this outstanding thing that they weren't even aware of that needed to be addressed. And it came up, hopefully will come up pretty quickly now that they've taken care of it and gotten it resolved. But 50,000 from a 3-point differential, what is it at 25, 30, 40, 50 points, right? Where you might qualify for the loan, but you're costing yourself thousands and thousands of dollars over time.
And you wouldn't even know it because the interest rate that's proposed to you is based on your FICO tier, right? And so, or you get shifted into a Federal Housing Administration type loan, FHA, a great product. However, it comes with life of loan mortgage insurance, where you may remember the term PMI. FHA has their variation of mortgage insurance called MIP, and it lasts for the life of the loan in most cases. So it never evaporates, it never comes off. And so I can always refinance it down the road. And again, I'll say, no, I can give you 5 reasons why you'll never be able to refinance. One is if interest rates continue to climb, you're not going to refinance to a higher rate, even if you're dropping PMI. The value of your home could be lower in the future, and you don't have the equity to refinance, blah, blah, blah. So when I hear people say, I can always refinance, I'll say, okay, that's not true. Like this may be your forever product. Your ability to refinance is contingent on things outside of your control. Maintain your value, maintain your employment, conforming loan limits staying the same in the future. Those go up and down. Right now, we've only seen 10 years of up, but they may come down in the future so that your loan becomes a jumbo instead of a conforming loan, blah, blah, blah. So time. Yes, you said it. You said it. If you have the luxury of starting this process early, you will come in with all your instruments are sharpened and buff polished and shined. You step up and
Well, and
you
just
go,
to jump in here real quick and kind of relate back
"Whoop."
to my own experience of what you just walked through and understanding your financial profile and then making some changes to put yourself in the best position. Those things in and of themselves are time consuming and stressful and potentially overwhelming. And when you layer them on top of the fact that you're trying to buy a home for the first time, it really becomes just, it's overwhelming is really the best word. And if the timeline is such that it's all happening in a condensed period of time and
All right.
there's this excitement that you're trying to enjoy the experience, it just becomes
Great.
really difficult to manage all of it.
Yeah.
So if there's
Right.
one takeaway we're circling around that might be most important, I feel like I'm gonna vote for time and just giving yourself some
Totally. Right.
space to really
And,
deal with it.
and imagine walking over your threshold for the first time as a homeowner and being relaxed, and you didn't get wiped out and beaten up, and you didn't sell your soul.
Hmm.
Everything was really planned, orchestrated, and it went the way it should. That's the luxury of time versus coming over the threshold, collapsing, exhausted, frustrated, and
Yeah.
there's really no need for that. We can walk through the threshold and start ready to enjoy the new life versus
Yeah.
to totally be a part of a difficult journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to
So
enjoy the journey.
right, right, and be as less stressed as you possibly can be, and what again, it's just naturally a stressful, anxiety-inducing experience. It's just huge. It's just there's no way
Yeah,
around it, and I'm coming from somebody who felt like I was very prepared and understand the financial implications, and it's an overwhelming experience to buy a home, especially the first time. So, giving yourself that space and that luxury is just, it feels so critical, especially after
yeah.
talking with you. Um,
So
so what about like anything we hear a lot about, when to start looking for a home, the spring buying market? Are there anything else that people should consider, about when maybe to start looking for a home?
yeah, so there's seasonal conversations, there's cycle conversations, and I don't think any of it really matters. So buying or selling a home in the spring market versus transacting in January, I think we want to remove any cyclical considerations and take it back to the mission statement. Right? Is the goal to be in by the time a child is starting a school system, or when, as you approach retirement, that you want to be in this community uh, before or at retirement age? So I think the personal timeline related to your mission statement is the one that we want to respect, and trying to jump into a heavy traffic pattern in the spring market, right? Because it's the right time to do it, or there could be a good deal out there, or there's more inventory. That's external. And I'd say if you
Mm,
can keep your internal mission statement preserved and protected, work on your timeline, not the market's timeline. And
hmm.
as for trying to, time a bigger market, um, it really can't be done. Right? We can't see behind the curtain to what's going to happen. I think we all have a feeling that there should be more inventory coming because interest rates went right up a wall, right? But we don't know for sure. And what I thought was going to be a substantial market correction when COVID rolled into town, turned out to be the exact opposite. So
Right.
I have to be really careful about making predictions which way I think it's going, because
Yeah.
you simply don't know, and you have black swan events that can disrupt that. So your own timeline is the most important. The market timeline, the seasonal timeline, um, trying to do something ahead of an interest rate change, which may or may not happen. You're really likely to try to rush, and you're more apt to make a mistake when you're responding to something that may or may not happen. You're your own worst
Mhm.
enemy. We're trying to
Hmm.
beat an imaginary, like,
Right, and that I hear that from clients and people I talk to, and we've had this conversation, I think, in the past as well, where it's like, man, do I need to hurry up and get this done because rates are going to continue to go up, or values are going to continue to get away from me, or whatever the reason is, people feel a rush to transact and kind of get in the game without maybe giving themselves enough time to really address
right,
everything we just kind of talked about, and specifically what are you doing this for in the first place, right? Just because you feel like you're missing out, or just because you feel like the economy is shifting, that is not a reason to go out and buy a
right.
house, right?
you're,
And
yeah, you're, you're,
it's going to be more stress than it's worth, if that's where your
yeah,
starting point is.
and you're literally raising your hand, and you're jumping into chaos very reactively, right? And
Hmm.
so make a proactive game plan and honor it,
Hmm.
and you will have success, and you will do it in a civilized fashion. But if there's somebody else's stopwatch that's running, and it's in your ear, it's going to
Hmm.
add, it's going to elevate the cadence of the transaction. It's going to start to
Hmm.
just go a little bit quicker, and mistakes could be made at that point. So always
Right.
just break it down to your own timeline, your own why and
Yeah.
ambition. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. So we've covered a lot. Is there any other tip, idea, anything you want to leave people with when they're thinking about, starting this journey, and hopefully they've got a pen and a piece of paper out and they're going to start taking some
Yeah.
notes and jotting down some ideas about what's important to them. But what else? Do we leave anything out, or do you think we've given people enough to consider?
You touched upon it, but it's your gut instinct. It's what you're feeling inside too. And if you can't get an answer for something, you have to walk away from it. So you find out enough that you can be satisfied, and don't bend on those. Don't bend on those parameters ever. So just honor yourself and what you're looking for. And if you feel that it's not going right, just turn around and walk out. And that's meant to be. And so don't be pressured into something that isn't perfect for you. It'll come eventually. And so
That's great.
the failures end up always being successes every single time. When it
Yeah.
fails, I think the next one, it's better. And so things fail for a reason. And when you try to make them not fail, uh, you're magnifying the potential of the failure.
Right. And again, it might sound like I'm embellishing a little bit when I said I had a panic attack when we made the first offer on a home. But I'm not. I'm not saying that for dramatic effect here. I literally had to take a walk and catch my breath when I got home after that, because it just didn't feel right. And I should have listened to myself and listened to your advice. So if it's not right, it doesn't, you don't have to force it, and you'll thank yourself, because we ended up,
You will
luckily in the
thank
right
yourself.
home, which we ended up selling and moving into an even better, what we consider now to be our forever kind of dream home right now.
Oh, so
So
awesome.
the failure worked out tremendously in our favor, and we now drive by that house, and every time we do, we look at it and say, man, I'm glad they didn't take our offer. I'm glad we don't live there. So that'll be let's I think maybe we could wrap it up there. Before I let you go, this is a show about financial well-being, but well-being in general, and not to put you on the spot, but is there
Yeah.
any trick, habit, ritual that you partake in and practice in your life that helps you feel a little bit better, resets you mentally, physically, emotionally, that you'd like to spotlight for folks before I let you go?
Yeah. Um, so I'm big on permanent guardrails in my life, things that protect me against my own mistakes. And over the past couple of years, I've just been instituting these guardrails that help me stay focused on where I'm trying to get to. And some of them are easy, some of them are difficult. But once I put it in place, it's like a programming cartridge that I try to put them in and just keep them right until the finish line. And Yeah, one of the easy financial things that I've been doing is making coffee at home every
Mm,
day since January 2019. If I don't make it, I can't buy it.
so
So,
building good rituals, good habits, setting yourself
yeah,
up for success. I love it. I love it. That's
yeah,
great. Where
yeah.
do so we'll link to some of this stuff. You mentioned the sample mission statement that's on the website, but where do people go to check you out? And where do you want to direct some eyeballs or some clicks for folks?
So we have a program for folks who are currently renting and are considering going into home ownership, and it's our home ownership aptitude score. So it's a quiz they can take, and it outputs a score for them, which we tell them where they are in the journey. Are they better situated to stay as tenants, or should they drill down on ownership a little bit more? I'll send you the link to the home ownership aptitude score. It's free, and tenants can take it and learn more about themselves. It opens up a conversation, hopefully earlier in the process than later, that allows us to talk about building a mission statement. And so, yeah, goldcoastmortgage.com /home ownership aptitude score. And it's a place to start a journey.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks for the expertise. I don't know many people. I know a lot of great mortgage professionals out there, but
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know many with 10 to 30,000 conversations under the belt.
Right.
So I really appreciate your time and expertise in joining us today, John. And I know that hopefully people can learn from my mistakes and overwhelm of and the panic and
Yeah. Yeah.
listen to your words of advice and not go through a similar experience. It doesn't have to
Right.
be that way if you give
It's
yourself
so
some
key.
time.
If we can learn
Yeah,
from other people's mistakes, and yeah, just it helps us
cool.
move along a little bit more efficient. So thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me on
All
and
right.
allowing me
Yeah,
to
you
share
got it.